Goodness gracious, the weather. Welcome. Depending on where you are in the country, really, you might be looking at snow out the window. Jessica's down by the Houston area and she's not really seeing too much. I'm up by DFW Fort Worth. And trust me when I tell you, we've got ice and snow out here. So I had to be creative just to get live today. Technology is keeping us on our toes, to say the least, but that's okay. We're all here. And so we're pleased and happy. And I'm so thrilled to be able to talk to Jessica because it's kind of a timely issue, if you will, as far as politics and women running for office and why they do and why they don't. So I'm looking forward to talking about that. So whether you're watching live or the recording, thank you. I know time is precious and oftentimes we get so busy and we don't always have the time to, we don't take the time to sit down and listen to interviews. So I appreciate you being here, like I said, live or the recording. So I want this to be a conversation because it's such a pertinent one, if you will. So please put your questions in the comments and let us be able to answer those and talk about them and have discussion and stuff. So Jessica, welcome.
Hey, Debbie, thanks for having me.
I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled. So I'm one of those people that I'm more interested in the conversation than the bio, because nowadays all you got to do is put someone's name in, right? And you find everything you want to have. So I don't read bios because it's all out there. And after you can go back and hopefully everyone will connect with Jessica and or me if you're not connected with me on LinkedIn. So I want to get right into it because there's so much to talk about. And Jessica, you've got quite the history with your background and the strong foundation for how you view politics, because you've been involved in so many different levels, if you will. Share with us how your experiences shape why you're seeking to represent Texas in Congress. What made you want to go into that, if you will?
Yeah, I've been involved really in Republican politics since I think it was like 16 years old. I was actually a congressional page on the Republican side way back in the day. So I've been involved, and my husband too, in the grassroots side of stuff from the Republican Party for years. And then really moved over, I started my career as a commercial litigator, but, loved politics and with, just our conservative values. And that's when I really came over, Debbie, to actually work in the conservative movement and apply my, my skills as a lawyer to helping out our values.
So this is going to be a challenge, y'all, because of the weather, because we're all facing that. Jessica was telling me before we got on that she's facing some ice issues down there, not the snow, but the ice. And as we know, every state, well, not every state, but many states are struggling with the technology, if you will, because of the lines and the power lines, the ice and et cetera. I do LinkedIn here. Obviously, I do the live here, but I also am on my phone. And so I monitor the comments and everything here. And so bear with us as we go through this, because I think it is going to be a challenge with what's happening with the internet. I will tell you that I met Jessica years ago while we're waiting for Jessica to pop back on, and was really impressed with the work she was doing as an attorney. She's very involved. She's got two cute little boys, and when you have small children, it's one of those things, before you have children, you don't always notice just some of the same things because your world is different, right? But when you have children and grandchildren, all of a sudden it looks totally different with you and what you want to do and the concerns you have for the future of those children. And so her having two young children is a huge reason, I'm sure, for the fact that she's running for Congress. And as she said before, she got bumped off. But I can't put these comments on because they're on the LinkedIn feed, if you will. But Darlene, yay. I'm eager to turn in and hear this discussion with my pal and future Congresswoman. Thank you, Darlene. Becky McCrae. If you don't know Becky McCrae, check out Becky McCrae. She does some incredible work. I was going to say all over the country, but she's Canada. She's a lot of different places on helping small towns, if you will. And so thank you, Becky, for being here. And Vanessa Joy. Vanessa, I also know dearly. She's a young woman who is trying to bring voices and information on rural America, if you will. She's got chapters across the country. So all these people, and you can see those in the comments on LinkedIn, if you will, connect with each other, have conversations with each other, because truly that's where it all starts, right? That's one of the benefits of LinkedIn, if you will, because you're able to connect across the globe. I always quote Chris Brogan, because Chris is the one who wrote the book, The Freak Shall Inherit the Earth. And so I always say there's no borders anymore. Jessica's back. I was saying that you and I were talking about the ice and everything. So,
I know. I think it was literally, we were just joking about it, but the internet had a surge issue. So I'm like, okay, I'm actually on my cell phone now because the computer is messed up. But I figured the cell phone was faster.
Exactly. You look great, my friend. So I was just kind
Thank
of
you.
telling that you have two small boys. And when you have children and grandchildren, your views change about what you want to do in the
Yeah.
world and why you want to do it. So continue on, my
Yeah.
friend. Continue on.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's when I started becoming involved in, Republican politics and really, went to work for Senator Cruz, went to work for the Trump administration. So I was there at the Department of Justice. I was the director of the Office for Victims of Crime. So the largest federal entity to combat human trafficking, the largest funding that was used, and then, helping victims of crime. And then now been working for America First Policy Institute that Debbie, you know so well as well.
Yes.
Just, again, my area has been more the litigation side. So pushing back against, the conservative, the woke left side. But like exactly what you said, Debbie, I think when you become a parent, there are things that you decide you need to step up and lead on. And I think it's easy to not do that and just, continue your everyday life. But we need people to step up and protect our conservative values. And I think, I was seeing this with my young kids. We got like a subscription book service. And we got this book one time that was just, so far woke left for a 2-year-old kid, and that's when you start as a parent saying, I need to be a voice in my kid's life as well.
That's so interesting, Jessica, with everything going on in the country right now in so many different facets. I'm old enough to remember back in the day, not that I really was old enough for Walter Cronkite, but back then the news was the news. I just want the facts, ma'am. I don't want people's opinions. I don't want their ideology. I just want the facts. And I think that sometimes
Exactly.
people don't see that because so many of us are on social and the algorithms go and that's a whole different conversation, a whole nother day. But thank you, Ellie, for being here as well. Ellie is Park City's Republican Club, and she does a phenomenal job with her organization. And again, I said this when you were off the air there for a second, Jessica, but everyone on the comments, please connect with each other because y'all have so much in common of just wanting to do the right thing and to do the best for your individual community. So please connect with that. Why do you think so many women either don't run or they struggle to run for office, or they have the challenges? I mean, so many say, oh, I'm going to run for school board first. A guy's going to say, I'm going to go for president first.
Yeah.
We think we go all the
I
way up
think
to
there's I think it's just women. It's how we're structured. I mean, I know I'm like this too. We like to be organized. We like to know what we're talking. All the pieces of the puzzle there before we run. And I think there's sometimes can be men that aren't. They're just ready to jump forward. Where again, a woman wants to be a little bit more prepared. And we see this all across the board. And so I think sometimes it is harder for women to jump in. But I would say we need more women, especially on the GOP side. I think that there's a space for women to be up there. And again, if and when we're losing a little bit more of that suburban vote, it's helpful to have other women, speaking to those women voters to get that GOP vote. So we really, and again, when we're looking at policy, again, talking about being a grandmother or a mother, it's just a different perspective than a man. And I think it's helpful when we're making legislative policy to have more women involved in our policy making.
Yeah, I think that the numbers they're pretty. Congress 28%, state legislatures 32%, and governors 24%. To your point, I think that we need all. I think a balance is wonderful. 50. I'm not saying make it, but for more women to
Yeah.
run for office, we have two on this interview here, Becky and Vanessa, who both in a certain way represent rural communities, if you will, and that's an area that many people do not understand. To your point about
Yeah.
suburban, we've got to get everybody involved so all voices are heard because no one know. What's the old saying? Till you walk in my shoes. And if we don't have people up there saying those things, I know that what do you think women bring to the conversation that maybe men don't, as far as like some of your different issues you're running on? But I think women, we all bring a different salad to the party, if you will. What do you think women's biggest contributions
Yeah.
are?
And I think too, it's just going to be a different perspective too, right? And I mean, women are different than men, I think biologically, and we see this, physiologically too. So I think it's just, we're going to have a different perspective. And so I think, again, and being a young mother, my perspective is going to be different from other people's as well. So I think having those ideas and perspectives is what, really adds value too.
Right. Well, and that's such a good point in the fact that, for so many years we didn't even have a seat at the table. Well, if you don't have a seat at the
Yeah.
table, you're not able to contribute anything. So again, I applaud you for you running for office. Now you've worked, as you mentioned earlier, in DC. You worked at AFPI, President Trump, different areas, their Department of Justice. What disconnect, if you will, do you see between DC and local communities? What disconnect, or what do you
Yeah.
see they're not hearing or they're missing?
Yeah, and I think luckily, I've only lived in DC during that time of the Trump administration, and working for AFPI, I actually lived, back here in Texas. And I think there is something to be said about not being in that DC bubble. And I think being here again with our grassroots, I mean, we are seeing, they are seeing the day-to-day effects of our economy, or again, here in Texas, or really the whole nation, but of our border immigration policy, the bad border immigration policy that Biden had. And we see that on the ground so differently than up in DC. So I think it's so important to be, tied into your local communities, and just, like you said too, hearing on the ground, hearing from your local school board, what is really affecting the schools? What are you seeing? What's happened since COVID? Talking to parents. I think that's just such a different perspective than, again, being kind of up in that DC bubble up there.
That's so funny you say that, because one of my favorite news people, he always, I don't know if he starts his story or ends it, or if he still does it. I'm trying to think. You get so used to what you hear, but his thing was outside the bubble, because that is it. But the majority of the countries, my goodness, is outside the bubble. But if you don't have people with voices to share that, you don't know that. You don't know it. Now, you
Yeah.
worked with the
Yeah.
Department of Justice, and so you really saw firsthand the lawfare and the weaponization up close and personal,
Yeah.
probably more so than we can even fathom. Are there specific safeguards that you would push, or that you would be in favor of, to prevent government agencies from being used as political weapons? Because we've all hear everything, right? And we all
Yeah.
see that, but we're not close enough to really understand it. What would you say
Yeah.
that would help
Well,
with
and
that?
honestly, the lawfare, I mean, we saw it the first Trump administration, but we saw it so much more prevalently during the Biden administration. I mean, I think most of us could never even have guessed we'd have, DA Alvin Bragg going, literally, bringing lawsuits against our president. And here at America First Policy Institute, we actually sued Alvin Bragg right back again. But it's just stuff that was so unprecedented. We couldn't even, the laws hadn't even caught up. There weren't court cases on it even. So, I think it is so important that we have people digging into this. And honestly, that's where you get the Oversight Committee and Judiciary in Congress really drilling down on the DOJ, on the FBI, all the law enforcement entities there, and making sure that they are running correctly, and not having lawfare issues from inside our federal bureaucracy.
Now, let me ask you a question on this. This is from someone who loves law shows, but I know nothing about it. So you have to have well, no, that's not right. Do you have to have a former case to be able to base your case on? You mentioned that earlier. There are no
Yeah.
previous cases.
So
Don't
you
you have to
don't
have
have
something like
to, but yeah, basically that's called precedent. So when there's precedent on the book, there's a former case that's directly on point, then the court's going to have to defer to that. But your cases aren't always on point, right? The facts could be a little bit different, the law is a little different. Again, you don't have, and that's why we have lawsuits. If the facts are there, if the precedent is there, you don't bring a lawsuit because you can see it black and white. And that's why we have lawsuits, because there's some kind of differentiation in the facts or the law that says, hey, my case isn't exactly like that case. Let me bring it. And so that's why, and a lot of these with President Trump's case, we just never, no one's ever tried to sue the president. I mean, it's outrageous to think of.
that?
And so there never was a case on it before.
Fascinating. Yeah, I know when I was working on my master's for education as a principal, certain cases we had to know, obviously, that had pertained to education, Brown and all those. So it just made me think about that when you said that. That was interesting. Now, defending the Constitution, I've heard you speak many times, is a recurring theme in your work. I mean, you really do believe it's would you say you believe it's at risk now, or do you say there's concerns? What would you, because I've heard you speak many times about the Constitution and et
Yeah.
cetera.
No, I mean, that's our founding document. And I think, we have to look back to that every time when we have one of these questions come up. And that's, Republicans and Democrats. And I think Republicans have been better at it. But look back and see what our founders said. And I think there's so much of that as we get, new technology, the internet's just in a new space that we never could have thought of. Look back to those founding principles we had, and that can help really guide us and tell us where we need to be. And I think that's, at AFPI, that's our whole basis for our litigation. I mean, looking back and seeing some of the outrageous things the Biden administration did, we look back and say, this is against our constitution. This is a basic constitutional, most of the time it was separation of powers. This is something the executive branch is not able to do as the executive branch. The power has not been given to them in the Constitution. It was given to, most of the cases, it was given to the legislative branch. And we
Right.
saw the Biden administration again and again, thwart the Constitution. And so we just go back to those guiding principles of where our country, was initially founded.
I think it's a history person here, love history. When you look worldwide historically, very few countries make it to where we've made it, 250 years,
Yeah.
very few. And I think one of the primary reasons would be because of our Constitution, our founding fathers, and what they, goodness, go back in history and be a little fly on the wall. The discussions and stuff to have gotten us this far is incredible, and to continue working on that. The country got hit with this huge major ice/snowstorm, depending on where you are. The map was crazy, and they call schools again here for us tomorrow, which
Oh,
is very
oh my
unusual.
gosh. Yeah. Yeah.
But I a lot of people don't realize that there's only three grids in the country, three power grids, and Texas has one of them. And we still had so many homes that were, I think it's like a 500,000 around the country that are without power. But
Oh, yeah.
since we have one of those three power grids, there's been so much discussion on U.S. domestic energy production while keeping our costs low and our grid secure, and with the advantages of that for independence. What have your
Mhm.
discussions or involvement has been with any of that? Have you had
Yeah.
any? Because it's very
Yeah.
fascinating to watch from the outside.
No, I mean, definitely. I mean, and down here in Houston too. I mean, Houston is an oil and gas and energy industry, community. I mean, that's my dad was in the oil and gas industry his whole career. I mean, we grew up with that. That's kind of Houston, if you will. And a lot of our industries are built around that industry. And so, looking at again, we just night and day, Biden administration, Trump administration, and just opening up the production in the United States. And the other twofold of it is our friends in the administration, which some of them too, is just pulling back those regulations that are just hindering, not just the oil industry and energy industries, but all businesses. And so really pulling back that over regulation, the red tape. I mean, that has been so critical. And I think we will continue to see that these next 3 years with Trump as well.
So that's so fascinating about the oil and gas, because it's one of those things that people don't think about until they need it. And so many people
Yes.
are getting coal and getting different things built to survive, the temperatures and the weather, if you will. My daddy was in oil and gas as well, but on a different level. I always joke that if you're from Texas and you say your daddy was a roughneck, you know what that means. If
Yeah.
you say oil and gas in another state, they think, oh, he had a lot of money because it's oil. No, that was not the
It's like,
case at
that's not
all.
quite it always. Yeah, there's a few of those in Texas, but not the majority by any means. Yes.
Exactly. And if you just a plug here for Landman, if you haven't watched Landman, people, you have got to watch that show. They do a really good job
It
of
is.
depicting what that life is like, because it's a hard life to work
It's
those
a
risks.
very hard life. Yeah,
It is
yeah.
not easy at all.
It's a
So
great show. I'm not caught up in their most recent season because of the campaign, but I watched the beginning season. Loved
well,
it.
we have two more to watch, because we're trying to. I don't like to watch it, and then you have to stop and you have to go to the next one. It just drives me crazy. But
I
anyway, a plug
know.
for oil and gas, you really have to watch Taylor Sheridan's Landman, because it's
You
really
do.
a good one, to say the least. In some ways, you've served behind the scenes with AFPI and even with the Department of Justice to a certain extent behind the scenes. Why is now the right time to step into the ring as a candidate? Talk to us about the decision making with you and your husband for that, or even just your
Yeah.
family, whomever that had.
Yeah. When we came to us with, the prior member thinking about retiring, and, again, just looking at like who would step up in our community. And that I think that was somewhere where we said, hey, we need good leaders to step up. And Debbie, this too, have been up in DC, for a good time, is we need people, especially in the Trump administration, that are ready to serve day one and aren't learning on the job. I mean, that's, it's an uphill battle to learn, and you get a lot of members that get in the job and they're learning it, and we can't have that with Trump. Trump's going to have 2 more years in office to get things done. And so that was really, the big consideration when people came to me, sort of asking me to run for this seat, was, we need you now. You have the proven record, and we know what kind of, legislator you'll be up there. And I think also, Debbie, again, from being in DC, it's a lot about relationships too. And
Yeah,
just having those relationships is what can get things done, sort of behind the scenes, or in the front of the scenes. I mean, when we have such a
gridlocked Congress. And especially for our district, let's say there's, a VA issue or an education issue, we could call Secretary McMahon's team, or we can call, over at the VA, Doug Collins' team that worked with us at AFPI, and actually be able to get stuff done for Texans, whether it's a grant issue, so many issues come up. And that's where, you know, when this kind of came open and really leading up into it, and my husband and I sitting and thinking about it, we're like, we need good people to step up. And you just look around and you say, if it's not us, who's going to step up? And it's very easy to keep saying, oh, let's let someone else do it. But again, I think also being a young mother makes you say, if I don't do it, who is stepping up for our kids? And we look at the life that our kids are having. I mean, we used to, growing up, we lived on a cul-de-sac. We'd run around all day. Your parents are just out, we were out there running around. I'm like, my kids will probably never have that, experience. It just, and so there's so many things, American values that we want our kids to have, and the left keeps kind of eroding that American life that we've seen. And so I think, if people don't step up on our side, good people willing to, sacrifice and lead, that's when the left will, eventually take over. So that's really kind of our consideration over a good amount of time, thinking about if this is the right spot.
Right. I know you as a friend, and so when I asked you to do this interview, I had to go back and do some research. I was interested to see, which this is a huge compliment to you, that some very successful politicians have endorsed you. Obviously, you have Greg Abbott, you have Senator Ted Cruz, you've got Dan Patrick, Morgan Luttrell, the one who held this or held this. Yeah. So why? Because they could have chosen a man, but they chose you. I think that's a huge.
Honestly, it's the same thing too. And honestly, Debbie, the first week, Senator Cruz and Dan Patrick both endorsed, and it's because of, I've worked with them and they know me. I mean, those were easy calls to make, and they were like, hey, we knew you were going to run at some point. You're the right person to do it. That was an easy, yes, of course I will endorse you, because it's, again, it's people like you, or our mutual friends that say, I've worked with you, I know your character, and I know you'll get stuff done too. I know you're a hard worker. You have the right values. You have the proven conservative record. So really, that's why in our case, we've had, almost every endorsement has come our way, because, really, I'm the only one running in the race that has that proven conservative record. But just, again, had those, it's not like I'm coming to them for the first time saying, hey, you've never heard of me. It's, hey, you've known me for over a decade. You know my values, my work ethic. And so that's just, that's kind of where we've been very lucky, but it's been a good race so far.
Well, what do they say? It's not really luck. It's you've already done all the proven history for them. So congratulations. Yeah. I do want to do a plug, as I said, all the people on the LinkedIn here in the comments section, please connect with each other, because all of you will have amazing things in common. I do want to do a plug for Ellie Cole, because she is the president of the Park Cities Republican Women's Club, and I've been there a couple of times, and she does a phenomenal job of sharing politicians and different things that are happening out there to keep people informed and educated. So I just want to say that. But again, you've done some amazing things. I mean, our dear friend Yako Buins, who fights human trafficking constantly, that's been central to your career. I mean, you've done so much on that. What does Congress get right and wrong on that issue? Because really, I don't care where you fall on the political spectrum. No one wants a child, to anyone, but especially children, to be trafficked. What do you think the issue is there that they get wrong with that?
It's so hard, because you're exactly right, Debbie, that this really is a bipartisan issue. I mean, again, nobody's for human trafficking except for the cartels, right? So, but it's disappointing. I mean, even so, in the first Trump administration, we had some amazing policies we put in place, some amazing grant programs we put in place to really help that traffic victim move back into society, get housing, get jobs, really moving them back to the next step. And unfortunately, when we left the Trump administration and Biden administration came in, they rolled back some of those. And again, these were programs that should have just been, these are programs that everyone should like. I mean, these aren't Trump or Republican. I mean, they were obviously, but these are just human trafficking programs to combat human trafficking. But unfortunately, the Democrats, it's things like that they just are stripping down because of Trump. This is a Trump program that I worked on. And so it's just, they cannot get past that blinder. And I think it's the same in Congress. There are good initiatives that the GOP is putting up that they just can't get past that blinder of this is the GOP or this is a Trump, this is a Trump agenda. I have to say no. And it's so frustrating because it's hurting the American public too.
Right. I think that trafficking is one of those issues that no one, I shouldn't say that. It's such an emotional and such a horrific thought to have someone go through that many people won't look below the lines, if you will, to what's happening. And as I said, I mentioned Yaku Booens and Tammy Barrier. They do some incredible things in the Dallas area, well, nationwide. But to your point, those aren't political. Those are human rights, if you will. And people don't realize that someone's trafficked, if they get them out of trafficking, which they do rescue a lot of people, their road back to recovery is not an easy one. And I know some of the stuff y'all tried to put in was to help them after that fact, because it takes time. You just don't walk back into society and everything's normal. Your world's never normal, but you have to be able to, have the resources to deal with that. Well, I'm hoping that, because like I said, I think that's just such an emotional issue. It's heartbreaking to even think about that. Heartbreaking.
And it is. I mean, a lot of times the victims, unfortunately are on drugs because they're, pimp or handler, has got them on, it's not just a switch the light, the other way. And a lot of times they go back into it. And that's where, getting people jobs and homes and really integrating back into society, that's where, you see people move on with their life too.
Right. Which is what you want. That's the thing. I do believe, again, regardless of political points, everyone wants the best for their families and their loved ones. And I think sometimes we let media or sound bites or whatever get in the way of that. Because I do think at the end of the day, that's what we all want for everybody. I want that for no matter what your political party is, for you to have a healthy, happy life. So why do you think women, we talked a little bit about that, but are so unrepresented? I mean, despite we make up 50% of the population, what do you think, if you had to say 3 to 4 key reasons that women are
the main thing I think is just women wanting, going and running too. And I think it's a lot of different factors, again, like we had talked about before, feeling like they're not ready. And I want to say, you're never going to feel ready to do it. And I think that's like a lot of jobs we take on. I know, we've had friends that have very important jobs and you're never going to feel ready. And so I encourage more women to get involved if it's whatever race it is, but get more involved. Or like you talked about, the Republican women's clubs. I mean, they're a great way to get involved, learn the political elected officials in your area, see how you can plug in too. But I do think it's, we need more women to kind of step up, not just behind the scenes, but in front too.
Right, for sure. Yeah, because people need to see the faces of women out there doing what they're doing. I mean, that's so important. I was going to say something about that. My mind just went blank. I was thinking about when you were saying that about different women. Okay, it'll come back to me. It'll come back. We see this more now than ever. There's such a divide today in the media when it comes to policies, and you touched on that a little bit before. But I think it begins with how someone views America first. And you've worked with America First Policy Institute, but just America First. I always go back to that thing. When you're on a plane and they tell you, take the oxygen mask, put it on yourself first before you take care, even of a child, put on yourself first, then help them. To me, that's what America First is. Can you share with us your insights on that? Because you have done so much work with America First Policy Institute, which I have the utmost respect for, and the work that everyone there does.
I think that's exactly right, Debbie. I think I think sometimes
for some reason, you're cutting out really bad.
It's the internet too. How's that?
Yeah.
It's going in and out. I know. I think
it's really all we're getting is static.
I know I hear it a little bit.
Okay. So while she's doing that, I want to mention something. I was doing some reading about this when I said about Jessica. And I want you, when you come back on, Jessica, to talk about this. Is it true that women candidates get so much less support financially and even from the establishment, if you will, regardless of party? Again, that's what I was reading. Is that true?
I think it's hard. I think
Yeah.
You know, especially as
Can you tell you're breaking up, Jessica? Can you tell?
say it again.
Yeah, no, I said, could you tell that we can't hear you? Your voice is breaking up really badly.
Yeah.
We're going to remember that we had this snowstorm and see where we live up here, even out in the country, a lot of our power lines are underground. If they're above ground, you're in trouble because of the ice and all that kind of stuff. But let's try again. So go ahead and see. Try. Are you with me? I think Jessica's frozen. I think. Jess, if you want to try, if you can hear me, if you want to try popping off and popping back in like you did before, that seemed to work. If you want to try that. I tell you, I love technology, but it is so frustrating when for whatever reason it doesn't work. Yeah, try coming back in, Jessica, and see if that helps. No, as I was saying, when I was doing a lot of research for this and trying to look at all the different things, if you will, see if we can get it now, if it's better. Oh no. I was really amazed at how less support that the female candidates get over male candidates. And again, if you go to a gathering or whatever, it's not gonna come for likes to be with likes, right? You might have women go with women and men go with women in discussions, if you will. But I think when it comes to things like this, I know so many amazing men who would support female candidates without a shadow of a doubt. But to Jessica's point, they have to run first, right? So I think that's it. And if anyone on the feed here, so I can't get it up on the computer because of the weather. Has anyone on here thought about running for office? Let's try again. Jessica, is that better?
Hey,
Okay.
third time. Yeah.
Okay.
Third time
Third
to
time. So
but ask
what,
them too. I mean, you were talking to people.
what were you talking? What were we talking about? I forgot. This is amazing. Oh my goodness. We tried so hard. Can you hear me, Jessica? Is Cassie there to help you?
Okay, maybe we got it.
That sounds good.
Finally.
That's the
Fourth
fourth
time's
time.
charm.
So what were we talking about? I was sharing with him that I had done the research about finding out how much less female candidates get over male candidates, which was surprising to me.
I think it's a little bit harder for women. I will say that. I think there's just still some very traditional people that still don't want women in certain places, but I think there's a lot of people that don't think that and want women there. So I think you just gotta, everyone's been dealt different hands in life, and you just dealt your hand, and you just put your best foot forward too.
Well, and that's what I said when we were trying to get you back on. I said, but you have to run first to let them see that you're willing to do it. And the fact that you had all these male politicians support you shows that they will.
And I think that's as we have more and more women running and taking leadership roles, it'll become more and more normal.
Right,
so I think don't let that stop you. Definitely.
And we're definitely seeing more women running. It's just that it should not be in Congress 28%. I mean,
yes. And I think that's a lot of those women are leaving. I think it's even on the GOP side going to be smaller this next year too.
Yeah. Well, and I can't even fathom the challenges of trying to do a family. And I know you have such a staunch support with your husband, because it does take a family, if you will, to be able to help with children and all that kind of stuff. What have I not asked you about that you want to share? And just in your journey of how long has it been since you made the decision to say, yes, I'm going to run, to today?
3 months, or is it 4 months? It was around mid-September was the time. So it's all blur, I feel like. And honestly, we're early voting, Debbie, is February 17th here in Texas. And the vast majority of people now in Texas early vote.
Yes.
So, we say, election day is March 3rd, but it's really February 17th.
Right.
So that's what, look at, I tell everyone to look at in your community from top to bottom, do your research beforehand, sit there and look at their backgrounds. I think, again, in my race, I'm really the only one with a conservative proven record, before I've run. And so you can look back and see, hey, here's lawsuits she's filed, here's statements she's made. This is how, this is her thoughts on these issues. Look and see that for each of your candidates and say, where have they been on the issues before? What have they done in my community? Have they been involved in the grassroots? Have they, voted in Republican primaries recently? Look and see that they are active in our Republican Women's Club.
Right.
And I think that's, to really look through and help you narrow down, who you're going to vote for on election day.
That's interesting because you have two things. One is it's easy for people to say, I'm going to do this. But if you don't have a track record, it's a 50-50.
Debbie. It's easy. You can get talking points and you can say the talking points all day long. But if you've never done it before, how do we really know what you're going to do when you get up there?
Exactly. And even if you have someone who's never run for office, and let's just say they've just been really involved in the community, they've got a track record there. It may not seem as big to them, but to the person who's going to elect them, it would be. People just want to see you're going to do what you say you're going to do, and that there's proof of that for sure.
I think even if you haven't, not everyone needs to go be a legislator, state legislator before. Go again, be involved in your Republican women's clubs or different grassroots, group in your county too.
Right, for sure. Well, I so appreciate you being here, Jessica. And I put your website up here so people can go and take a peek at it, because it does take resources to be able to do what you're doing. And I see you literally almost daily somewhere speaking to some group. Some are very intimate and some are very big, but you're out there talking to people and letting them know what you've done, what you believe in, and what you're going to do moving forward. So
I appreciate this. And thanks for having me on, Debbie. I know you do such a great job. So I was honored to be able to join into, even though we had a lot of technical difficulties. I'm glad we got through the storm and we're able to do it.
That's a perfect pun there. Got through the storm. Well, I appreciate you doing it, because I know that you've got a lot of things going on, and probably the snow helped a little bit because you weren't out on the road, if you will, because the weather's not quite so good. But I just so much appreciate everyone being here. Again, whether it's live or whether it's a recording, I appreciate all the people in the comments. Please make sure you connect with Jessica Hart Steinmann on LinkedIn as well as anywhere else. And if you're not connected to me already, please connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm a huge advocate of LinkedIn, and it's your virtual Rolodex. And all the women who were here today, you have so much in common, and you never know. Someone here could need something you offer. And so you never know how you can connect with that. So Jessica, thank you again. And thank you everyone for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Debbie.